Good day, everyone. So today, me and Ben Harvey Mariano will going to report the topic about the 18th century from court to theater. So the contents of our report composed of glance at the past, dancers and personalities, dance of the 18th century, and lastly, dance designs. So let's proceed to the glance at the past. So in 18th century, ballroom and theatrical performances began to separate technically and aesthetically as the century progressed. So as the century progressed, as time goes by, ang ballroom kag ang mga theatrical dances separated na. Kag ang mga major dance centers nga gina-considered are the French and the English theater. So sa France, in 1700 to 1750, amo na siya ang age of the minuet. So ang minuet, amo na siya ang dance nga ginalink to the monarchy. So with the age of the Reason, the monarchy began to crumble and the contradance supplanted the minuet. So sa age of the Reasons ang monarchy nagbegan to crumble na kag ang contradance amo na siya ang nagbulos sa minuet. So the French Revolution during the 1789 to 1799 created a turning point for France and for ballet. So during the early 18th century, ballet subjects had focused on classical mythology. So the French Revolution, the French Revolution is the first major social revolution in modern history. So amo ni siya ang French Revolution, amo na ang rason kung nga si Louis XIV nagpatindog sa palace sa Versailles. Kag ang mga gastador kung sa aton tawgon nga mga kings ang nagbutang sa France nga na bankrupt sila. Kag ang mga other issues included is ang mga unfair tax system kag ang demand for the end of feudalism and serfdom. So when we say serfdom, amo na siya ang pagkaalipin. So ang the unequal power and economic distribution among French nobility, bourgeois, and peasant society escalated among mentalities. So the social and political changes in France during the 18th century precipitated many of the changes that happened in the arts, especially in dance. So, ang mga tropical events nga na-mention before, amo na siya ang mostly nyo makita sa mga performances sa court kag sa may stage. So next, the dancers and personalities. With the establishment of the Paris Opera at the beginning of the century, the arts of theater and dance grew in stature. So professional dance stars of both genders emerged. Their innovations in developing ballet separated it into a singular art form. So in the theater, ang mga professional male dancers ginatawag nga dancer noble. Amo ni siya ang term nga nagamit sa all throughout the next 2 centuries. Kag ang mga professional female dancers nag-contribute sa costume innovations para ma-enhance ang ilang role sa ballet. So ang mga ballet themes and stories move from mythological to realistic with humanistic elements. So our first personality is Louis Dupre, also known as Le Grand Dupre. So si Louis Dupre is a professional dancer at the Paris Opera. His imposing presence and expansive majestic movements lend him the title as the God of Dance. So siya man ang teacher ni Gaëtan Vestris. So next is Gaëtan Vestris. So si Vestris nag-claim nga isa siya sa pinaka-importante nga mga lalaki during the 18th century. Kag nag-assume siya sa title nga God of the Dance from Dupre. So Vestris born in Italy into the family of a traveling dancers. Kag nagsulod siya sa may Paris Opera in 1749. His style and technique soon made him the leading dancer in Europe. His jumps were extraordinary, and he performed with finesse the newly developed pirouette. His career was a series of triumphs in theater throughout Europe. His son Auguste followed in his footsteps. So next is Auguste Vestris. So Auguste Vestris debuted at the Paris Opera at the age of 12. Kag na-achieve ang rank As a premier dancer by the age of 21, he danced at the opera for 35 years, passing on the next generation of male dancers the dancer noble traditions that his father and other dancers of his generations had perfected. So next is Maximilian Gardel. Gardel made his debut at the Paris Opera. So, sang 1773, he danced without wearing the customary mask in a production of Castor and Pollux. He did this to avoid being mistaken for his rival Gaetan Vestris, who had been announced to dance the role. Gardel, who was considered one of the pioneers of ballet pantomime, became a ballet master at the opera in 1781. So next is Pierre Gardel. So si Pierre Gardel kuno began his studies upod sang iyang brother nga si Maximilian. Kag naging soloist siya sa may Paris Opera in 1780. So nagpadayon siya kuno para malumpuwasan niya ang iyang brother nga si Maximilian as the chief ballet master and choreographer at the opera, holding the post for 40 years. So, ang iya mga ballets kuno is importante sa may opera's repertory. So, isama siya kuno sa mga respected teacher. Kag ang iyang pupils nga si Carlo Blasis, whose work would become important in the 19th century. So, si Gardel kuno nagin-outline niya ang requisites of the dancers nobles. So next is François Prévost. The little historical information available about François Prévost's background and training comes from her contemporaries and her later students. Much is unknown. She did appear at the Paris Opera, but the date is unconfirmed. Her legacy was long and distinguished career. Her talents were characterized by Jean-Philippe Rameau as versatile, marked by prodigious dance and dramatic ability. In 1714, she appeared with Jean Ballon in pantomime of the final scene of the tragedy Les Horaces. Dancing the role of Camille, her performance provided a glimpse of the dramatic direction French ballet would take later in the century, but her most enduring contribution was as a teacher for Marie Salé and Marie Camargo. So next is Marie-Anne de Cupid de Camargo, simply known as Marie Camargo. This extraordinary dancer made her debut in Paris after training with Prévost and some of the finest male dancers of the time. Her dance style was quick, displaying intricate footwork. Performing jeté, battu, entrechats, and other steps in the air led to changes in female dancer attire, so that audiences could see her dazzling footwork and air movements. Camargo shortened her skirt from floor length to above the ankles. To better perform these intricate steps, she discarded her high-heeled shoes into a flat slipper. One of Camargo's contemporaries, Marie Salé, was her rival on the stage. Camargo supported exemplified in her dancing the musical ideas of Jean-Philippe Rameau and become known as Ramiste. She was popular both on stage and in the French court. Camargo's coiffures, bonnets, and shoes were admired by the ladies and became high fashion. So next is Marie Salé. Marie Salé was a child prodigy in a theatrical family. She danced in both London and Paris, studying with Prévost and Ballon. Among her partners were Dupré and Gaëtan Vestris. The Parisian press stirred up an intense rivalry between Camargo and Salé, whose style was expressive and graceful. Salé was the champion of those who supported the precepts developed by Lully from the previous century. She made a significant contribution to ballet with her costume innovations. In 1734, playing the part of Galatea in Pygmalion, she wore a simple draped dress like a Greek chiton instead of the traditional period dress with undergarments of corsets and panniers. She also let her hair down rather than wearing it styled with elaborate hairpiece. Although Sala did not achieve the popularity of Camargo, her beliefs about costume reform inspired John George Noverre to support her ideas that costume should be part of the unity of designs in a ballet. So next is John George Noverre. Noverre was a dancer, teacher, and composer who served as the maître de ballet, or the ballet master in many European teachers. One of the first people to grasp the artistic potential of ballet. He expressed his ideas in his 1760 book, Lettres sur la danse et sur les ballets. For the next 10 years, Noverre was the ballet master in Lyon and Stuttgart, working with dancers Gaëtan Vestris and John D'Aberval. In 1763, he produced Mede et Jason, a ballet in which the dramatic action was entirely portrayed through dance and pantomime. In 1776, he was appointed the ballet master at the Paris Opera, but left in 1781. In trying to sweep away the stagnant rules of the 17th century ballet decor, Noverre initiated reforms that established ballet the action. In this form of ballet, the plot was usually not a tragedy. The dramatic action was extended through gestures and facial expression, and the corps de ballet was an integral part of the plot. These elements contributed to the creation of a unified ballet production. Noverre collaborated with such composers as Mozart, Haydn, and Gluck. So next is John Weaver. John Weaver began his career as a character dancer at London's Drury Lane Theatre, where he performed from 1700s to 1736. He arranged dances and is credited as the father of English pantomime. He invented a theatrical style of entertainment that was a forerunner of ballet the action. In 1717, he produced The Loves of Mars and Venus, which told its story through music, mime, and dance without speech, singing, or declamation. So lastly, John D'Aberval. John D'Aberval was a pupil of Noverre and accepted his theories, which included using natural characters in ballets. He danced at the Paris Opera and was considered a person of wit, intelligence, and taste. He is remembered for his ballet La Fille Malgarde, a two-act comic ballet pantomime which continues to be staged in the 21st century. Produced in 1789, it was later staged in London, eventually reaching Paris and New York in the 1820s. Little remains of the ballet other than the plot and the idea of showing ordinary folk on stage, in contrast to the elaborate mythological ballets commonly produced in the 18th century.
So next, at this point, we will going to talk about the dances in the 18th century. So at the beginning of the century, dance was an integral part of the court. So it mirrored society and provided insights on how people conducted themselves in society and in relation to the events that were taking place around them. So basically, through dance, mabalaan natin if we're part of society they came from and if anong ilang social class sa society. If they came from the upper class, lower class, or the middle class. So in the second half of the century, unfortunately, the court life became increasingly fragile, and the decrease in the performance is in high numbers. So one of its causes is the invasion of the French Revolution that toppled the monarchy that time. So in the century's last decades, the middle class, or what we know as the bourgeoisie, expanded its influence and its taste for entertainments and dance. So dance also, in both court and theater, underwent many changes in the 18th century. So as for everyone's information, ang dance nangin preoccupation or naging constant preoccupation sa court during kang 18th century. And through this, they give dance lessons that enhance one's status. So, sa diri nga dance lesson, ang mostly naga-join and mostly nga nag-took class is ang upper kag ang middle class. So, in these lessons, the purpose of nagtuksan na kang class because para mangin better sila mag-perform kang sa pinaka popular dance during their time is the minuet, and also to learn more of the court dances. So the first dance we have is the minuet. So the minuet was a symbol of the aristocracy in the French court in the first half of the 18th century. So dancing it indicated accomplishments and gentility. So when we say gentility, it is more on social superiority. So if you are dancing the minuet, you can consider yourself as a part of a upper class, and you have powers and you have titles. So most minuets were in 3/4 or other triple time and consisted of phrases of 4 or 8 measures. So there are 4 figures in minuets. Kag ang pinaka main figure gid gina-perform ta na in S or in Z pattern. This dance lost its favor during the second half of the century with increasing resistance to the monarchy and was no longer performed after the French Revolution. With all the challenges nga ginfaced kang minuet dance, however, it survived and it continued to be a fashionable in England into the early 19th century. At least nakasurvive ta na, and at least nangin part magyapon ta na kang history country during the 18th century. So the next dance we have is the contra dance. So the meaning of the term contra dance is conflicting. It may refer either to a rustic country dance or to a counter dance. So the term contra dance is a dance against dance. So with its roots in the late Renaissance, contra dance became fashionable in England, France, other European countries, and America during the 18th century. So just like the minuet nga nangin fashionable ta na sa England during 19th century, this contra dance nangin fashionable man siya in England and other part of European countries, and nangin part man siya sa America. So it was a long ways dance. So nangin long way siya kay it performed by 2 lines wherein ang couple nag-face each other. So during the dance, the leadership or ang head kang dance or ang head couple changed. So all couples were equal participants. So if there are 30 participants a girl, there should be 30 equal men man ng participants. So the dancers shows the order of the steps. So the next dance we have is the other popular 18th century dances. So under this are reels and trapeze and continuing court dances. So besides the minuet and contra dance, other dances from century past remain popular and new dances rose to prominence in various countries. So first we have the reels and trapeze. So the reel probably ang origin na is a Scottish origin and dating back to medieval times. So it is a lively dance with figures performed on tiptoe. So 2 or more couples danced in a circle formation, changing partners while weaving in and out in a figure 8 pattern. So it is also accompanied by pipers. So ang trapeze naman is a slower version kang ginatawag nga reel. So next, we have continuing court dances. So other popular court dances included couple dances from the previous century. So ang mga court dances included kang mga couple dances nangin part magyapon ta na kang 18th century dances. So, ang mga dance includes like as gigs, lively gavottes, bourrées, sarabands, currents, rigodons, and fast pasipids. So, the akasse, also popular in the later days of Louis the XVI court. So, ang amo dyan nga mga dances dominated the ballrooms until the French Revolution. And the last dance we have is the ballroom. So during the French Revolution, the executions and the mob violence were really relevant. So social dance was a popular diversion or isa siya sa nag-divert kang attention kang tao from everyday tension kang executions and mob violence into social dance. So for much of the population, however, these executions were almost in the category of entertainment. So gina-categorize nila gina-considered nila ang execution as a form of entertainment. So the French Revolution triggered other revolutions. So wala lang siya nag-apekto sa dance but also in other aspects kang society, especially in politics kag sa imagination kang tao. So one important result was that from this point on, ballroom dance became a bourgeois activity or ang mga middle class nangin activity na nila ang pag-dance kang ballroom. At this point, let's talk about the ballet in the 18th century. So ballet was included in theatrical performances in the 18th century, beginning with first the opera ballet. By the later part of the century, choreographers had embraced the theory of second, the ballet reaction, which they developed to support the new ballets they created. Near the end of the century, ang mga dancers that time were like illusions of the air. So nagagamit na sila ka mga wings in their costumes kag they flew through air. As in Zephyr at Floor, which offered a glimpse of what ballet would become in the next century. So the ballet in the 18th century evolved over time. There are versions of different ballets, and we have three ballets during the 18th century. So first, we have the opera ballets. Second, we have the ballet pantomime. And last, we have the ballet reaction. So first, we have the opera ballet. So opera ballet is a genre of French Baroque lyric theater that was most popular during the 18th century, combining elements of basically ang opera kag ang ballet. So the opera ballet that was prominent in the first half of the century was an extension and development of the ballet in operas from the 17th century. So during the 17th century, ang ballet opera is nag-exist na. And during the 18th century, naging extension na lang tana kang kung ano ang ginumpisahan. So the best known French composer of the first part of the century is Jean-Philippe Rameau. So composed music as he plotted the action of the ballet. So ang formula ni Rameau, ginfollow niya ang one set ni Lully in the previous century. So after ni Rameau, the opera ballet began to disintegrate, or when we say disintegrate, is more on falling apart of something. So Rameau's and Lully's musical styles and philosophies became the crux of an aesthetic war, wherein ang mga musicians, dancers, kag ang Parisian society separated into two camps. So, namely the Rameau's kag ang kay Lully. So, Lully represented the comfortable, harmonic style of the past, while Rameau presented the contemporary or even futuristic view. So, with the rise of the French opera, the opera ballet began to decline. So the next ballet dance form we have is the ballet pantomime. So John Weaver, an English ballet master of the early 18th century, is considered the originator of pantomime ballet. So a drama in dance form that became formalized as a classical ballet reaction later in the century. So the term ballet pantomime refers to storytelling through gesture or the theatrical form itself, which originated with the mummery plays in medieval England. So ballet pantomime focused on dramatic action told through pantomime, with dances interspersed throughout. So basically, ang ballet pantomime nagatel through gesture, through action, and the emotion itself sa dancer. So wala ni siya naga-include kang words or there are some nga ginahambal. So it is more on the gesture and the movement of the dancer. So the last form we have is the ballet action. So ballet action is the continuing form of ballet pantomime. So ballet action, ballet in which all the elements of production, example, ang choreography, set design, and costuming are subordinate to the plot and theme. So it is more on the overall production kang ballet. So ballet action was the next step in the development of ballet as an art form. So Noverre work in developing this new form was influenced by leading choreographers such as Austrian Russian court ballet master Franz von Verhelverding. So at this point, let's talk about the last topic. We have the formations and movements and the style of the 18th century dances. So the minuet is one of the popular dance during the time, was a danse à deux performed by one couple at a time, or in which dancers created S or Z floor patterns. So next we have the contradance was a livelier, more robust than the cool controlled minuet. So in England, ang ginagamit nilang formation is ang two lines nga din-mention ko kagina nga ang couples nag-face each other and gina-perform kang by 6 or more couples pa. On the other hand, in France naman, gina-perform nila ang minuet in the formation of square. So either isa lang ka couple at a time or tanan nga couples ang nagadance kang figures. So at the beginning of the 17th century, dances focused on creating floor patterns. So ang example na is ang bato ang S or ang Z patterns. So this changed as raised stage became more prominent. So Rameau stressed verticality and the use of opposition of the arms. So also the use of turnout and the raised stage with a proscenium arc created a frontal focus to dance performance. So last, we have the styles of the 18th century dance. So there are 4 broad ballet styles evolved during the 18th century. First, we have the serious or the grave style. Next, we have the demi-caractère. Third, we have the comic. And fourth, we have the grotesques. So first, we have the serious. The serious or the grave style, the La Ballet dance or the La Dance Noble, as it was called, was reserved for noble characters such as gods, goddesses, kings, queens, heroes, and heroines. So this style was more popular in France than in other parts of Europe. So Marisol, a French choreographer and a dancer, performed this grave style using soft, graceful terre-à-terre movements, long balances on one leg, and beautiful, slow port de bras. So next we have the demi-caractère style. So it is a combination of the serious and the comic, used for psalms, nymphs, Cupid, lesser divinities, heroes, idealized peasants, shepherds, and shepherdesses. So the light, brisk movements and jumps made it more popular than the grave style. So in this half serious style, dancers perform gavottes, brigadons, gigs, minuets, and chaconnes. So as Marisol performed the grave style, Marie Carnago as her rival, was a prominent of this kind of dancing. So third, we have the comic, and fourth, we have the grotesque dance style. So often this too is combined by some writers in the 18th century. So it is were part of the comic pantomime ballet. Stories of villagers and peasants incorporated folk dance steps such as hornpipes and jigs, which were adapted from the stage. So in addition, dancers performed high batmas, multiple pirouettes, acrobatics, and other tricks. So that's all for my report about the dances of the 18th century, the formation, movements, and the style of the 18th century dances. So in behalf of Like Halbuena, we thank you guys for your time and effort and listening in our report, and we hope you have learned something in our discussion. So thank you guys. Keep safe, God bless, and bye everyone.